They say the memory plays tricks on you. That the past gets softer with time, sanded down into something more bearable. But I remember that car like it just drove off yesterday, the blue Chevy Caprice, 78 model, rust crusting around the wheels, paint faded in patches like worn denim. Every Friday, without fail, it sat across from Kennedy Elementary, idling at the edge of the chain-link fence that boxed in our recess yard like we were something fragile or dangerous. I was 5 the first time I saw it. That same year my father left. It's funny what the mind attaches itself to when it's trying to survive something it doesn't understand. That Friday, I was still crying from the week before, when my dad packed a single black duffel bag, kissed my forehead without looking me in the eyes, and told my mom, "I'll be back to get my boy." He didn't say when. Just, "I'll be back." He didn't knock again. Not once. But that Friday, 1 week later, I looked up from the tire swing, and there it was. Blue. Big. The kind of car with muscle in its frame. The kind my father used to talk about when he watched NASCAR and cursed under his breath at Dale Earnhardt. I stood still, staring across the cracked asphalt, past the fence, past the teacher on yard duty who never paid enough attention. And in that car, behind the glare of the windshield, was a shape. A person. I couldn't see his face. But something in me lit up like my insides had remembered how to hope. It wasn't just any blue car. It was his blue car. That night, I told my mom what I saw. She laughed once, short and dry. "You need to stop making up stories, Jamal." "I'm not." "It was him." She bent down, took my chin in her hand like she was trying to keep me from drifting too far away. "Baby, your daddy's not coming back. You understand me? He made his choice." But I didn't understand. Not then. Not for a long time. I watched that car for 10 years. Every Friday. Same place. Same time, just before the last bell. I never told anyone else after that first conversation. It became my secret ritual. I'd press my face to the playground fence and wait. Some weeks, it didn't come, and I'd go home with a lump in my throat and no appetite. Other weeks, I'd see it sitting there before I even stepped outside. Sometimes it idled, exhaust puffing out like little sighs of impatience. Other times, it was parked cold and silent, like it had been there all day, waiting. There was never a license plate I could make out. The sun would hit it at the right angle, or it would be covered in grime. That was part of the mystery, too. Part of the myth I built around him. Around it. I told myself stories. That he had to leave for reasons he couldn't explain. That there were people after him. That he was a spy. Or a cop gone rogue. That he'd made a mistake but never stopped loving me. That he was watching, waiting for the right time to come back. Each story changed depending on the week. But the ending was always the same. One day, the door to the Caprice would open. He'd step out, walk across the street, kneel in front of me with tears in his eyes, and say, "I told you I'd be back." But of course, he never did. After elementary school, the car stopped coming. Or maybe I stopped seeing it. Middle school didn't have recess. There was no fence to stare through, no playground for him to watch. I tried to let go. Told myself it was childish, that real life didn't work like that. But even as I grew, the hope stayed buried under my ribs, like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing on. My mom remarried when I was 15. Mr. Reeves. He was a decent man, quiet, worked nights at the GM plant and always left a 20 on the kitchen counter. Just in case. But he wasn't my father. He never tried to be. I respected that. Still, every time I looked at the front door, I half expected it to swing open and reveal the man in the blue car, holding his old duffel, asking what he missed. Life went on, as it does. I got through high school with decent grades, enough to land a scholarship to Wayne State. Stayed local because Mom didn't want me far. Said she? Already lost one man to the road. Didn't want to lose another. I didn't correct her. But part of me wanted to say I wasn't staying for her. I was staying for him. Because he might still be here. Because he might be waiting. I studied sociology, mostly because I liked understanding why people did what they did, why they stayed, why they left. It was like trying to decode my own life by studying everyone else's. But the answers never satisfied. After graduation, I did what too many people do when they don't know where to go next. I wandered. Took a string of jobs. A call center. A used furniture store. I even worked as a security guard at one of those 24-hour laundromats off 8 Mile. Everywhere I went, I looked at people's faces, scanning them like they might carry some piece of him. A smile. A gesture. A scar. I never found him. Then, one summer in 2010, I signed up to volunteer at a local youth center near the old neighborhood. Figured it was time to give back, maybe help some kids who felt like I once did, abandoned, confused, stuck waiting on someone who never showed up. It was a Tuesday when I met Isaiah. 9 years old. Thin as a switch. Eyes too big for his face, and a chip on his shoulder that could have knocked down a grown man. He reminded me of me. He sat alone during lunch. Drew in a spiral notebook with a pencil so short it looked like a broken toothpick. I asked him what he was sketching. He didn't look up. Cars. What kind? Caprices. I froze. Why those? He shrugged. My dad has one. He comes to watch me sometimes. From his car. Something cold and electric passed through me. What color? He glanced up, suspicious. Blue. Why? I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night, I dug through my old boxes in the attic. Found the notebooks I used to keep as a kid. Every Friday from 1st to 5th grade, I'd drawn a square with 4 wheels and scribbled something like, "Saw him again today," or "He stayed longer this time." The handwriting got neater over time, but the message never changed. I flipped through those pages for hours. Then I got an idea. The Caprice had to have a record. Something. A paper trail. Parking tickets, maybe? Citations for loitering near a school. It was Detroit in the late 80s, early 90s. There had to be a system, no matter how broken. I didn't sleep. I just started digging. Because I was tired of wondering. Because maybe I'd never stop being that 5-year-old boy staring through a fence, waiting for the man in the blue car to open the door and say, "I told you I'd be back." You ever chase a ghost through paperwork? I did. After hearing Isaiah say those words. My dad has one. He comes to watch me sometimes. From his car. I couldn't sit still. Something old inside me woke up. Something raw and sharp. I started going through everything I had. Every box. Every notebook. Every memory that hadn't turned to dust. I wanted proof, not just for me anymore, but for Isaiah too. Maybe if I could find his dad, I'd find mine. It started with my old journals. I hadn't looked at them in years. Most of them were in a shoebox under a stack of my mom's high school yearbooks, stained with basement dust and mildew. Each entry was dated. Fridays, always. I'd written things like, "Blue car again. Parked by the tree near the janitor's gate. 3:05 p.m. He didn't leave until the bell rang. Windows tinted. No plates again. Still, it's him. I know it." Those notes were my time machine. My proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. The same time. The same spot. For nearly 10 years. No kid makes that up and sticks with it that long. So I started thinking. If the car was really there that often, someone had to have noticed. A school's security guard, a nosy neighbor, or, if I was lucky, a cop who wrote a citation. Parking violations are public record in Detroit, or at least some of them were, even back then. So I went down to the city clerk's office, hoping they'd have something. The guy at the counter was younger than me, looked like he just stepped out of college and still smelled like ambition. "You got a license plate number?" he asked, already reaching for a form. "No," I said. "That's the thing. I don't. But I have locations. Dates. A card description." He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "I'm serious," I said. Blue Chevy Caprice. Parked outside Kennedy Elementary. Fridays, between 87 and 97. That's a long window, man. I know. But I just need to know if any blue Caprice got sighted in that area. Please. He sighed, rubbed his temples like I was giving him a headache he didn't deserve. All right, he said. Let me see what I can do. The clerk came back half an hour later with a printed sheet and a cup of bad coffee he didn't offer to share. Here, he said, sliding the paper toward me. It's not everything, but I filtered for vehicle make and area code. Most of the stuff from the 80s and early 90s is spotty, but there's a hit in 1991. February. Unauthorized idling within 500 feet of a school zone. Blue Chevy Caprice. No license on file. My heart thudded like someone had punched it awake. Do you have the time? He checked. Says 2:55 p.m. That was it. That had to be it. The citation had a location, street and block number. The same block as Kennedy Elementary. That wasn't a coincidence. It was confirmation. I asked for a copy, paid the fee, and left with trembling hands. My fingers gripped that paper like it might float away if I let go. Back at home, I pinned it to my wall next to a childhood drawing of the Caprice. The resemblance was crude, a blue box on wheels, but I saw it. The same presence. The same ache. One parking ticket. One crack in the wall. I was starting to believe again. The next day at the youth center, Isaiah was sitting by himself again, drawing with the same broken pencil. I brought him a fresh set, mechanical ones with extra lead, and sat down beside him. He didn't say thank you, but he took them. You said your dad watches from his car. I began carefully. Does he come every week? He shrugged. Mostly Fridays. Sometimes Wednesdays too. Depends if he's working. I swallowed. He ever talked to you? Once, he said, eyes still on his paper. Gave me a Snickers through the window. Said he was sorry. That word. Sorry. It knocked the air out of me. What kind of car did you say he drives? He glanced at me, narrowed his eyes. Why do you care? Because when I was your age, someone used to watch me too. Same car. He stared at me for a long time. Then nodded once, like he understood more than most kids his age should. Caprices are cool, he said simply. I nodded. Yeah. They are. That night, I pulled out my dad's name, Raymond Delaney, and started cross-referencing with DMV records. I didn't have access to the system directly, so I called in a favor from an old college buddy who worked in the department. Said he'd take a look when he could. Days passed. Then a week. I started to think I was crazy. Like maybe I'd built a life around a mirage. But then the call came. Raymond Delaney, born 62. Owned a 1978 Chevy Caprice Classic. Registered under a P.O. box for a few years. No current registration. Last activity was 1997. Right around the time the car stopped showing up. I asked if there was an address tied to the P.O. box. He hesitated. You sure you want to chase this, man? More than anything. He gave it to me. On the edge of Hamtramck. Not too far from the old Polish bakeries. The building was still standing. The next day, I drove out there. The street was quiet, almost too quiet for Detroit. Cracked sidewalks, a busted fire hydrant, and a half-board corner store that used to sell grape now and laters when I was a kid. The address led to a 2-story apartment complex with peeling paint and sagging gutters. The manager let me into the records room for $50 cash and a 6-pack of Faygo Red Pop. I dug through rental agreements. Scanned names. And then there it was. Delaney, Raymond. Unit 2B. 1990 to 1997. My hands shook as I traced the signature at the bottom. I'd seen it once in an old birthday card he sent when I turned 7. Stay strong. I'll be back soon. Love, Dad. This was real. He had been here. He'd stayed close. Lived just 15 minutes from me for 7 years after he left. The questions swarmed me like bees. Why didn't he come home? Why watch from a distance and never knock on the door? What was he running from? And then, the biggest one, was he still alive? I went back to the youth center the next day, but Isaiah wasn't there. His counselor said he'd been pulled out of the program for a few weeks. Family stuff, she said. Not sure what. I asked if she had a last name. Johnson, she said. His mom? Tamika. I froze. That was the name my mom used to curse under her breath when she thought I wasn't listening. That Tamika chick ruined everything. I'd never known what she meant. But now I had to know. I called my mom that night. She was tired. Said she was watching Wheel of Fortune and didn't want to talk long. Ma, I said, did Dad ever know someone named Tamika Johnson? The silence stretched. Then, why are you asking about that man again? Just answer me. Another pause. Yeah. He knew her. She was around. Around how? She worked at the shop with him for a while. Then they got close. Too close. He moved out not long after. Said he needed space. Space, my ass. Did he have a kid with her? My mom exhaled hard. I don't know. I tried not to ask. I didn't want to know. If Isaiah was my brother, if the man in the blue Caprice watched both of us, if Raymond Delaney had left 2 sons behind, 2 fences, 2 lives he couldn't bring himself to be a part of. I didn't know if I was about to fall apart or be reborn. But I knew this. I was going to find him. Even if I had to dig through every record in this goddamn city. I didn't sleep after that call with my mom. I just sat in the living room staring at that old journal page again, February 15th, 1991. He came today. Stayed till 3:10. I think he saw me. 10 years old. I'd drawn a crude little heart around the words like it meant something. Maybe it did. Now I was 33 years old, and everything I thought I'd buried was resurfacing, names, shadows, pieces of a man I never really got to know. And Isaiah, this kid who could have just been another youth center file, he might be my brother. But I couldn't say it out loud. Not yet. There was something sacred about the not knowing. Once you named it, you couldn't unname it. Once you faced the truth, you had to live with it. I needed to see Tamika. I found her 2 days later. Not through Isaiah. I didn't want to spook him, and I sure as hell wasn't going to barge into his life claiming to be something I wasn't sure about yet. I found her through a public records search tied to the old address from the youth center's emergency contact form. She worked at a credit union off Gresham, assistant manager, according to the listing. I drove there on my lunch break. The building was glass and beige brick, tucked between a used car lot and a payday loan place with a flickering neon sign that read, "Cash Instant." I waited until her shift ended, then followed her outside. She looked the same age as my mother. Maybe a little younger. Still had presence, though. Tall, proud shoulders. Wore her hair in box braids, pulled back into a low bun. She didn't see me until I stepped into her path. "Tamika?" She froze, keys clutched tight in her hand like she was about to use them as a weapon. "Sorry," I said quickly, holding up my palms. "I'm not here for trouble. I think you knew my father." She narrowed her eyes. "I don't know who you are. My name's Jamal Delaney." She blinked. Just once. Then she said, "Well, hell." We sat in her car. I didn't push. Just let her talk when she was ready. "I knew he had a son," she said after a long silence. "He talked about you sometimes. Said you had his stubbornness. His eyes." I looked down at my hands. "I thought maybe." I hesitated. "Maybe Isaiah. He might be yours too," she cut in. I nodded slowly. She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Wouldn't that be something? Is it possible?" She didn't answer right away. Just looked out the windshield, watching nothing. "We were off and on," she said. "He was never good at staying put. But yeah, it's possible." I felt something in me tilt. Like the floor of the world had shifted half an inch. Why didn't he ever stay? I asked. Why was he always watching but never stepping in? She turned to me then, and for the first time, her expression softened. Because Raymond was full of guilt. He never thought he was good enough to be a father. Thought he'd mess y'all up worse if he came back. But he was already gone. Yeah, she said quietly. But being gone means you don't have to prove anything. You get to stay perfect in the eyes of a kid. You don't have to disappoint them more than you already did. I swallowed hard. I hated him for a long time, she added. But the truth is, he loved his sons. Just didn't know how to show it. His sons? She said it like it was already decided. She gave me an address. Said he'd stayed there for a while after the P.O. box dried up. A motel on 7 Mile. Said if he wasn't at work, that's where he'd be. Work? Used to do repo jobs, she said. Towed cars for a guy named Pete out in Redford. Paid under the table. No paper trail. And now? She looked at me like she wanted to lie. Like she wanted to protect me from something. But she didn't. He died, she said. About 6 years ago. Heart failure. Alone. My breath caught. My chest went tight like something had clamped around it. No service, she added. No obituary. Just gone. I stared at the dashboard. At the dusty vent. At the scratch in the glove box that looked like a scar. He's really gone? I whispered. She nodded. Yeah, baby. He's gone. I didn't cry in her car. Didn't scream or punch the dashboard or slam the door when I left. I just walked back to mine, sat in the driver's seat, and stared out at the sky like maybe he'd float down from it and explain himself. 6 years? That meant he died in 2004. I would have been 27. Still in college. Still hoping, somewhere deep down, that he'd show up to graduation. He never did. He never would. The next day I went back to the motel. It was barely standing. The kind of place you pass without seeing. Paint peeling off the walls. A busted vending machine blinking 12 o'clock. The woman behind the bulletproof glass looked like she'd been chewing the same piece of gum since 1993. I asked if she remembered him. Showed her a photo Tamika had dug up from an old shoebox. Him in a tiger's cap, younger than I ever remembered him being. She studied it. Room 9, she said finally. He used to leave his door open when it was hot. Sat in there smoking and playing old records. Marvin Gaye. Donny Hathaway. Was he friendly? She shrugged. Kept to himself. Always paid on time. Never brought women around. Just stared at that wall like it owed him something. Did he ever talk about his kids? She gave me a look. He ever not talk about his kids? I smiled then. Couldn't help it. A broken, aching kind of smile. What happened when he died? Paramedics found him. Neighbor called about the smell. No one claimed the body. I felt sick. The idea of him lying there, alone, forgotten, while I was out living my life, wondering if he still loved me. Is the room still open? She hesitated. Ain't rented in months. I can give you 10 minutes. Room 9 was more shrine than shelter. Dust coated every surface. The wallpaper had peeled back in long yellow strips. But the smell, cigarettes and old wood, hit me like a punch to the soul. Like stepping into his lungs. There was still a record player in the corner. A stack of LPs. Marvin Gaye's What's Going On sat on top, warped but recognizable. I opened the dresser drawers. Most were empty, but one held a small stack of envelopes. All addressed the same way. To Jamal. Some were dated. Some weren't. Some were never sealed. My hand shook as I picked one up and unfolded it. Jamal. I parked outside your school again today. You wore red. You looked tall. Strong. I'm proud of you, even if I don't deserve to be. I wanted to get out. I did. I swear I did. But my feet stayed planted. I don't know why. Maybe because I knew if I came closer, you'd see how small I really am. But I see you. Every Friday. I see you. Dad? I didn't read the rest until later. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. I slid to the floor, those letters pressed against my chest, and for the first time since I was 5 years old, I let myself sob. Ugly, open, throat-tearing sobs. He was there. He did care. He was broken, but he hadn't forgotten me. The next week, I sat Isaiah down after lunch. I didn't say I'm your brother. Didn't say our father loved us but didn't know how to stay. I just said, "You want to see something?" He nodded. I pulled out one of the letters. Read it to him slowly, carefully, like it was scripture. When I finished, he asked, "Who wrote that?" "Your dad," I said. "And mine." He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "He watched me too. Every Friday." I smiled. "I know," I said. "I know he did." You'd think closure would feel like a door finally closing. But it doesn't. Not really. Not when that door stays just slightly ajar, whispering with every breeze. Because even with the letters, the motel room, the truth about his death, I didn't feel closure. I felt like I'd stepped into a second childhood, one where the fairy tale was real but still ended in silence. I kept the letters in a shoebox under my bed. Couldn't bring myself to read all of them at once. I treated them like sacred things, slow, careful, unwrapping each one like it might disappear if I touched it wrong. One of them had a drawing inside. A car. Of course. Blue Caprice, sketched in black ink on the back of a Shell gas receipt. "Still runs?" he wrote beneath it. "Just like me." Another had a folded Polaroid tucked between the pages. Me. At the fence. 4th grade, May 5th. Faded red hoodie, hands gripping the chain link like I could pull the world closer. It was taken from across the street, his perspective. The angle was slightly crooked, like he'd taken it in a rush. I stared at it for hours. He'd taken pictures of me. He watched. He remembered. He tried. I didn't tell my mom everything. Not at first. She still answered the phone like she was bracing for an argument. "Ma," I said, "I found him." Silence. I found where he lived. The car. The place. The whole trail. "Why?" she asked. Not with anger, just exhaustion. Why now? I needed to know if he ever cared. She let out a slow breath. "And?" "He did." She didn't say anything. Not for a long time. Then, quietly, "That's harder than if he didn't." "Why?" "Because now you know he stayed close. And he still didn't come home." The next Saturday, I went back to room 9. I brought a duffel bag. Collected the letters, the records, a rusted wrench set in the closet. His smell was fading from the room, but I carried it with me. At the bottom of the closet, under an old towel, I found a shoebox wrapped in plastic. Inside was a small tin, like the kind for cookies or sewing needles. There were keys in it. One labeled Chevy in faded Sharpie. The other blank. I don't know what possessed me, but I called Tamika and asked the question burning at the edge of my brain. "Do you know what happened to the Caprice?" She sighed. "I think it got impounded after he passed. He had it towed once, couldn't afford the space to keep it near the motel. Might have been left at Pete's lot in Redford. So I drove out there. Pete's place was more scrapyard than storage lot. It sat behind a shuttered auto body shop, surrounded by a fence made of welded car doors and broken grills. A single dog barked behind a metal gate as I pulled up. An old man appeared from the shop, wiping grease off his hands with a rag that looked dirtier than his coveralls. "You Pete?" I asked. "Depends. You buying or asking favors?" I smiled. Bit of both. I explained who I was, and who I was looking for. When I said, "Raymond Delaney," the man's face went still. "Ray," he said, like he hadn't heard the name in years. "Towed for me back in the 90s. Good guy. Quiet. Always paid his debts. Did he leave a car here? Pete scratched his beard. Might have. We got a couple in the back been sitting forever. You say Caprice? Blue. 78, no plates. He nodded. Follow me. It was still there. Covered in a plastic tarp, mold climbing the sides, tires flat to the rims. But it was there. The car from my memories. The car from my dreams. My mythology made metal. Been sitting 20 years, Pete said. Ray stopped coming around. Figured he was dead. I walked to it like it might vanish if I moved too fast. Ran my hand across the hood. Flakes of paint came off in my fingers. Rust bloomed along the edges like dried blood. But beneath it all, it was still his. I pulled out the labeled key from my pocket. Slid it into the driver's door. It clicked open with a sound that felt like thunder in my ears. The inside was dust and decay. The driver's seat was worn through, foam poking out like old bones. An air freshener hung from the rearview mirror, cherry-scented, long dead. The glove compartment creaked open with a stiff groan. Inside were receipts, more photos, a pocket-sized Bible, and one cassette tape in a cracked plastic case labeled, for Jamal. Pete gave me a day to decide what I wanted to do. If you want it, he said, you'll need a trailer. Tow truck won't touch that without payment. I'll figure it out, I said. And I did. Called in favors. Used a chunk of savings I shouldn't have touched. Got it towed to a friend's garage who owed me 2 months of help from a move years back. I told him I wanted to restore it. He looked at me like I was insane. But he agreed. That night I sat in my apartment, alone, with the tape in my hands. I didn't have a working cassette player. Hadn't in years. So I borrowed one from the youth center storage closet, an old boombox used for dance nights that hadn't worked in a decade. But it still played tapes. I sat in my room, tape in hand, knees bouncing like a drumbeat. Then I pushed it in. Press play. And his voice filled the room. Hey, Jamal. If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. Or at least, it means you found what I couldn't give you when I was alive. I ain't good at words. You probably know that already. Most of what I wanted to say, I never got the chance to. I saw you, though. Every week. I saw you become a man. I saw the way you waited. And I couldn't cross that street. Not because I didn't love you, but because I didn't love myself. You needed a father. I only knew how to be a shadow. But I want you to know, I never stopped caring. Not for a day. I was there when you got your first bike. I was parked outside when you went to prom. I left a note under your mom's mat once. You never found it. That's okay. You were always the best thing I ever had a part in making. I'm sorry, son. For all of it. If you can forgive me, even a little, maybe that means there's still something good in me. Take the car. Fix it if you want. Let it be yours. Just don't be like me. Don't watch life from across the street. Love you always. Dad. I sat in the dark for an hour after it ended. Not moving. Not speaking. Just listening to the quiet where his voice had been. It was like he'd been reaching out across time, pulling me into something whole. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting. I was seen. At the youth center, Isaiah waited for me the next morning. He didn't ask why my eyes were red. He just said, I started drawing you a car. I smiled. Blue? He nodded. Like his. We sat side by side. Two sons of a shadow. And this time, we weren't watching the world from behind a fence. We were stepping into it. Together. They towed the Caprice into Devon's garage on a humid Tuesday afternoon, and when the rusted beast came to a stop, it felt like an old king being lowered back onto his throne. Devon leaned against the lift post with a toothpick in his mouth, staring at the car like it had crawled out of a junkyard horror film. You sure you want to do this? He asked. I nodded. It's not just a car. He didn't press further. Just walked around the frame and muttered, she's gonna need a miracle. So that's what we started building, One miracle, one bolt at a time. The engine was half dead, but the bones were solid. The frame had held. Rust had eaten into the wheel wells and the lower rocker panels, but nothing we couldn't grind back. We stripped it piece by piece, hood, doors, seats. Everything came off like dead skin, revealing the story beneath. I'd never worked on a car before. Not like this. My dad had tools, I remembered that. A set he kept lined up in a red Craftsman box like sacred artifacts. When I was little, I'd sneak into the shed and run my fingers across the handles, pretending I knew what each one did. Now I was holding those same tools. Same red box. Tamika had kept it all these years, tucked in her garage beneath a tarp and some old folding chairs. Said she couldn't bring herself to throw it out. You should have it, she told me. Maybe it was always supposed to end up with you. The weight of each wrench felt like memory. Like apology. Every evening, I left my day job at the downtown call center and drove straight to the garage. Devin gave me keys and full access, said it was good to see someone give a damn about something. I sanded rust until my fingers blistered. Replaced spark plugs and belts. Scrubbed oil out of the transmission pan while old Motown tracks played through the garage radio, crackling with static like ghost voices. Sometimes I'd pause when one of my father's favorite songs came on, Someday We'll All Be Free, or Inner City Blues, and just sit there, greasy hands in my lap, feeling something rise in my throat I didn't have the words for. It was like I was rebuilding him, too. Piece by piece. Isaiah started coming around after school. Just watching at first, then handing me tools. He was curious, quick learner, quiet like me. One night, I caught him tracing the car's emblem on a notepad. You know what that is? I asked. He nodded. Caprice. Classic. I smiled. You remember more than I thought. I remember the smell, he said. Cherry and smoke. He always had that in his clothes. That hit harder than I expected. I'd remembered it too. We replaced the interior slowly, found parts online, junked others from old Chevys rotting in forgotten corners of East Side yards. Some nights we'd spend hours pulling apart old dashboards, searching for screws that hadn't rusted through. It was like a treasure hunt in a graveyard. There were nights I didn't want to go home. Nights I sat in the front seat of that stripped Caprice and read another letter from the shoebox, turning the cassette tape over in my hand like a relic. I played it less now. Didn't need to hear the words to feel them anymore. But I hadn't played it for Isaiah. Not yet. It was a Sunday morning, 3 months into the restoration, when I finally asked my mom to come see the car. She hesitated at first. Said she didn't need reminders. Said she'd buried him a long time ago. But then she showed up, floral scarf tied around her hair, eyes already full of storm clouds. She walked around the Caprice without touching it. You remember this? I asked. She nodded once. He parked across the street. Every Friday. I know, she said quietly. That stopped me cold. You knew? She sighed. Of course I knew. I saw it too. But I had to protect you. If I'd said it was him, you'd have gone chasing. You would have waited forever. I did wait forever. She looked at me then, eyes tired. I know. And we didn't speak after that. She just sat inside it for a while, fingers on the dash, and cried so quietly I barely heard her. The next week, Isaiah asked me, What happens when it's done? What do you mean? The car. When it's finished. I didn't have an answer. Because it wasn't just about getting it running. It was about becoming something. Forgiving something. Maybe even driving forward. But I said, We take a ride. He smiled. Where to? Anywhere you want. The test fire came on a Wednesday. Devin helped me prime the fuel lines, install the new battery, double-check the wiring. We crossed our fingers and turned the key. The Caprice choked once. Twice. Then rumbled to life like it had been waiting all these years just to breathe again. The whole garage shook with it. Devin laughed and slapped the hood. She lives. I stepped back, heart pounding. ears ringing from the low growl of the engine. It wasn't perfect. It rattled a little. But it was alive. It was his voice, roaring through metal and time. I let Isaiah ride shotgun on the first trip. We didn't go far, just circled the block a few times, the streets of our city passing like old photographs out the windows. He rolled the window down. Let the wind catch his curls. It smells like him again, he said. I nodded. Yeah. It does. We passed Kennedy Elementary. The playground had new swings, new fences. But I still saw the ghosts. I still saw me, pressed against the chain link, waiting. I wondered if Isaiah saw himself too. We pulled to the curb across the street and parked. Just like he used to. And we sat there in silence. Watched the schoolyard. Waited for nothing. That night, I gave Isaiah the cassette. Play it when you're ready, I said. He looked at me. Was it for me too? I thought about that. Thought about the way my father said sons in some of the letters. The way he'd left photos of Isaiah too. The way his guilt didn't discriminate between us. Yeah, I said. It was. A week later, Isaiah brought me something, a drawing. The Caprice, detailed and perfect. Parked under a street lamp. 2 shadows inside. One large. One small. He handed it to me and said, "He would have wanted us to ride together." I nodded. We will. We're planning a trip now. Out past the edge of Detroit. Up through the highways he used to drive, the ones I always imagined him disappearing into. Not to run away this time. But to return. To trace the road back not to him, but forward to who we are because of him. To let the blue Caprice ride again. To let him ride with us. We left before sunrise. I wanted the roads empty. I wanted the silence. Just me, Isaiah, the hum of tires, and the sound of the old engine clearing its throat like it had something to say. The Caprice wasn't smooth, not yet. She rattled at high speeds, grunted on the hills, and one of the side mirrors still vibrated when we hit 50. But she was ours now. Ours in a way he never managed to be. Isaiah sat in the passenger seat, earbuds in, hood up, staring out at the fields that swallowed the freeway. We hadn't told Tamika exactly where we were going, just that we were taking the car for a drive. She looked at me for a long time and said, "Don't get lost out there." I wasn't sure if she meant literally or not. We headed west. Toward Grand Rapids first, then maybe up toward the lake. I didn't have a map, didn't need one. All I wanted was to keep moving. Like maybe I'd outrun something if I drove fast enough. Or maybe I'd catch up to something I missed. The letters still sat in the glove box. So did the cassette. But I didn't play it. Not yet. We stopped in Lansing around noon. Pulled off at a gas station near a church with boarded windows and a playground overtaken by weeds. It reminded me of Detroit in the 90s, so many places left behind. I sat on the curb while Isaiah bought a soda inside. The sun was high. The air smelled like hot rubber and spilled diesel. A man walked by and gave the Caprice a long, low whistle. "That's a 78, ain't it?" "Yeah." "She yours?" I nodded. He smiled like he'd just seen an old friend. "Used to drive one just like it. Took my girl to prom in it. We got married in that car." I smiled politely, but something twisted in me. That car was someone else's wedding memory. For me, it was a question mark with an engine. "You fix her up?" "Piece by piece." He nodded like that meant something more than I understood. "Glad to see one still on the road. Most of them just rust away." Yeah, I thought. Most of them do. That night we pulled into a small lakeside town. I don't even remember the name. Somewhere between South Haven and the horizon. A place with one diner, one gas pump, and a single-story motel painted mint green like a half-forgotten dream. Isaiah wanted to sleep in the car. I didn't blame him. There was something safe about it now. Something sacred. We took turns in the front seat, him drawing by the glow of the dome light, me listening to the engine tick as it cooled. The lake wind carried in the scent of pine and silence. He asked me a question around midnight. Do you think he would have liked us? I blinked. Liked us? Yeah, he said. As people. Not just as his kids. I looked at him, his narrow face, his watchful eyes, the way he carried himself like he was already older than he should have had to be. I think he loved us, I said. But liking someone, that takes presence. Time. Effort. I think he was scared of all that. Why? Because loving someone from a distance is easier. You can imagine the best version of them. You never have to deal with their mess. Isaiah nodded slowly, like he already knew. Do you like me? He asked. That hit harder than it should have. Yeah, I said. A lot. He leaned his head against the window. I like you too. We found a mechanic the next morning just outside of Holland who helped us change the oil and patch a slow leak in the rear left tire. He didn't ask for much, just a handshake and a story. So I told him we were driving the car our dad left behind. He nodded like he'd heard versions of that before. Fathers, he said, either leave too early or stay too long. I didn't know which one ours had done. Maybe both. We stopped by the lake. Isaiah skipped stones across the surface while I sat on a bench, the cassette player balanced on my knees. I still hadn't played it for him. You ready? I asked. He looked at me. Do I need to be? No. But I think it's time. I pressed play. His voice filled the space between us again. That same hesitant rasp. The unpolished sorrow in every syllable. Isaiah sat beside me, hands in his lap, silent. He didn't move. Didn't speak when the tape ended. Just wiped his nose with the sleeve of his hoodie and said, He sounded tired. Yeah, I said. He was. We didn't rewind it. We didn't need to hear it again. It was enough to know the words had been meant for us. The ride back was quieter. The sky turned orange over the farmland, and the Caprice cast a long shadow on the road ahead. We stopped once more, outside a shuttered movie theater with a cracked marquee. I took a picture of the car in front of it, Isaiah standing beside the open door like he owned it. Later, he drew the scene from memory. He gave it to me without a word. I don't know what I expected from the trip. I didn't think it would fix the years or fill the hollow space his absence left. But it didn't need to. The ride wasn't about repair, it was about recognition. About acknowledging that we came from someone broken and still chose to build something whole. I dropped Isaiah off at Tamika's that evening. He didn't get out right away. You think he would have come back if he lived longer? I thought about that. About the motel. The tape. The picture from the fence. Maybe, I said. But I don't think we were supposed to wait forever. Isaiah nodded, pushed open the door. Then, before stepping out, he turned back and said, Next time, we should go farther. I smiled. Yeah. We should. I parked the Caprice in my mom's driveway that night. She came out in her slippers, robe pulled tight, and stared at the car like it was a ghost with headlights. I never thought I'd see it again, she said. I didn't think I'd find it. She walked up to it, ran her hand along the roof. Then she looked at me. I'm proud of you, she said. Not because of the car. But because you made something from nothing. It wasn't nothing, I said. He left a lot behind. She smiled, soft and sad. Yeah, she whispered. He did. Later that night, I sat in the car alone. One hand on the wheel. One foot hovering over the brake. Thinking about the years I'd spent staring at that blue silhouette from a playground. Thinking about what I'd wanted him to be. And finally understanding what he was. Not a villain. Not a hero. Just a man who loved quietly, and lost loudly. A man who couldn't come home, but never really left either. I reached into the glove box and pulled out one more letter. Unfolded it. Read it again. And then I started writing one of my own. I wrote the first letter on the back of a diner receipt. Didn't plan it. Didn't think about it. Just sat in the Caprice one night after work, engine cooling beneath me, and the words started bleeding out. Like a bruise finally pressing through the skin. Hey Dad. You probably already know, but I found the car. I found the letters. The tape. I found the motel room you died in. Smelled like mold and cheap smoke. I stayed there longer than I should have. Just staring at the bed, trying to picture you in it. Couldn't. You always felt more real when you weren't in the room. That's the part one can't shake. You were more myth than man. More presence than person. The kind of story people whisper but never touch. But I touched you now. Through your tools. Your words. The car you left behind like a breadcrumb trail for a kid who never stopped wondering. And Dad, if I'm being honest, I'm still angry. I know you loved me. But love without action? That's like headlights on an empty road. You see everything but never reach it. I forgive you anyway. Not because you earned it. But because I need to. Because I want to sleep without asking the ceiling if I was ever enough to come back for. Jamal. That letter stayed folded in my wallet for weeks. I didn't show it to anyone. Not even Isaiah. I didn't write it for answers. I wrote it to release something. But the thing about grief is, it doesn't stay gone. It comes back in new shapes. In Isaiah's drawings. In old photographs I found stuffed in my mother's junk drawer. In the way I caught myself talking to the car some nights, whispering like maybe he was still listening through the dashboard. There was one photo that changed something in me. I found it at the bottom of a torn envelope, buried under registration slips and old receipts. A Polaroid. From the motel, I think. Not of me. Not of Isaiah. Of him. He was sitting on the hood of the Caprice. Cigarette between his fingers. Face turned away from the camera. You couldn't see his eyes, just his jaw, his shoulders, the tired set of his mouth. There was something worn about him. Not in a weak way. But like life had been using him for sandpaper. He looked like a man trying not to disappear. I carried that photo in the glove box after that. Sometimes I took it out and set it on the dash while I drove, like he was riding with me. Like he finally crossed the street and climbed in beside me. One Saturday morning, Isaiah knocked on my door. Unannounced. He was holding a folder. Mom said I should ask you first, he said, stepping inside. What's that? He handed it to me. Inside, school records. A birth certificate. And a letter from Tamika, handwritten, folded twice. I looked at Isaiah. She says it's official, he said. You're my brother. I knew it before I opened anything. Knew it in the silence between us. In the way his voice dropped when he talked about our dad. In the way we both looked at that Caprice like it was a coffin and a church. I smiled. And for the first time in my life, I said the words out loud. I have a brother. Isaiah just nodded like he'd always known. We started spending weekends in the garage again, not fixing the car, just being with it. He'd sketch. I'd polish chrome or rewire the stereo. Devin let us keep using the space, said it gave the shop a heartbeat. One night, Isaiah climbed into the back seat and asked, Did he ever take you anywhere? I laughed. No. I spent my whole life watching him watch me. Isaiah nodded. Same. And then he said something I still think about. You think he wanted us to stay stuck? Like, to live inside the mystery? I shook my head. I think he wanted us to move. Even if he couldn't. So we did. We started driving further every weekend. Not aimlessly, deliberately. Old places. Memory markers. We went to the old GM plant where he used to work. It was mostly rubble now, rebar poking out like broken fingers. We parked across the street and sat in silence. He probably stood right there, I said, pointing to a patch of concrete stained with oil. Waiting for the bus. Thinking about us. Isaiah pulled out a sketch pad. Started drawing him. Not from memory, he didn't have any. But from feeling. When he turned it to show me, I had to blink a few times to stay composed. It looked like the photo. Him on the hood. Looking away. Still caught between leaving and staying. Another weekend, we drove to the lake again. Isaiah brought a new tape. Not music, just static and wind. Said he recorded it with a mic out his window because the car sounded like it was talking. He played it back for me. And it did. The Caprice growled and groaned like a tired animal learning how to breathe again. I started to believe maybe he was in the car. That he lived in its frame. In the static. In the wind pushing against our windshield. I wrote more letters. Never mailed them. Left them in the glove box beside his. I didn't write to him anymore. I wrote with him. Like we were having a conversation through time. Isaiah started writing his own. He didn't let me read them. Said some things were meant to stay between boys and ghosts. I understood. One night, we pulled up to the fence line of Kennedy Elementary. The playground was quiet. Lights flickering across the blacktop. And I saw it. Us. 2 boys. Separated by 20 years. One gripping a chain-link fence. The other sitting in a blue Caprice, windows rolled halfway down, heart punching against the ribs. I turned to Isaiah. I think we can let it go now. He nodded. You mean the pain? No, I said. The waiting. So we got out. Walked across the street. Stood on the school side of the fence. Looked back at the car. Then turned our backs on it. Just for a minute. And smiled. The blue Caprice stayed in my mother's driveway for almost a year after that. Covered in a gray tarp, the kind that flapped in the wind and made neighbors whisper about dead projects and sons who couldn't let go. I didn't care. Every Saturday, Isaiah and I pulled it off like unveiling a monument. We didn't drive it every time. Some days we just sat inside. Talked. Or didn't. Sometimes the engine wouldn't turn over. Sometimes the brakes stuck. Sometimes the air smelled like him again, cherry and cigarette and something older, heavier, like regret soaked into leather. But it was ours. His. Ours. And for the first time in either of our lives, it was enough. I started writing more. Not just letters to Dad. Stories. Short ones. A boy waits by a fence for someone who never comes, until one day, he walks away and finds someone else waiting for him. Another about 2 brothers fixing a car that refuses to die, because some machines carry spirits, and some spirits don't know how to leave. I shared the second one with Isaiah. He read it twice and said, I think it's more real than pretend. I told him. So was he. Even if it didn't feel like it. One day, while digging through the last of the motel things, I found something I'd missed before. A note. Not addressed. Not dated. Folded into a paperback copy of Invisible Man. Inside it said, if they ever meet each other, maybe they'll understand why I couldn't be both at once. No name. But I knew it was about us. Jamal and Isaiah. 2 boys. 2 lives. One father who could never figure out how to be 2 things at the same time. I showed Isaiah. He didn't say anything. But later that night, he asked if he could sleep in the Caprice. Said the back seat felt more like his room than his actual room did. He started calling me bro around then. Not in a slangy way. In a family way. Like it was a small prayer said through the teeth. We didn't make a big deal out of it. Didn't hug or cry or do anything they'd put in a movie. But he started writing. From Isaiah Johnson Delaney. On his drawings. Said it helped him feel put together. That's when I knew the car wasn't just helping me heal. It was helping him form. By late spring, the Caprice was running smoother than ever. We took it out past 8 Mile one weekend. Just driving aimless again, music low, windows down, air full of old stories and exhaust. We passed a block where a kid was riding his bike alone. Red backpack. Wobbly handlebars. Isaiah watched him for a long time through the side mirror. Then he said, we should start something. Like what? I don't know. A club. Or a garage. For kids who don't have dads. A place where they can build stuff. Like we did. I looked at him. At the 13-year-old with a trauma-colored blueprint for hope. And I thought, he's already more of a man than our father ever figured out how to be. We called it Friday Boys. At first, it was just us. Then a couple kids from the youth center. Then some from Isaiah's school. Devin gave us space behind his shop, an old storage bay we cleared out, scrubbed down, and painted with Isaiah's drawings. We hung tools on pegboards. Set up a bench. Brought in parts from junkyards. We didn't promise to fix their lives. Just gave them something to fix. A rusted muffler. A busted carburetor. A bent license plate that said Love 81 with the E barely hanging on. I nailed it to the wall like a trophy. Isaiah laughed and said, "That plate's more honest than most people." We started writing letters together. To the kids. To ourselves. To the fathers who weren't coming. Some of the boys burned theirs after writing them. Others tucked them under seat cushions, or hid them in glove boxes of the busted cars we brought in. It became a ritual. Write. Let go. Build. Write. Let go. Build. Sometimes I sat in the Caprice late at night, reading one of their letters and thinking about how none of us were really broken. We were just unfinished. One Friday, Isaiah handed me a sealed envelope. "You don't have to read it," he said. "But I want you to have it." I waited until he left. Opened it slow. Inside. "Dear Jamal. Thank you for finishing the story he started. Thank you for being there when he couldn't. I think he would have liked watching us from the other side of the fence. Love. Your little brother." I cried again. Not like before. This wasn't grief. This was gratitude with a heartbeat. We hosted an open garage night that summer. Let the neighborhood in. Kids showing off what they'd built. Moms dropping off lemonade. Old men talking about the good old days, like they were trying to convince themselves they existed. Isaiah gave a little speech. Said, "This place is for anyone who ever watched someone leave." And no one clapped. They just stood still. Listening. Like the air had turned into something holy. Later that night, I sat in the Caprice again. Hand on the wheel. Thinking about fences. Thinking about how they keep things out, and keep things in. And how maybe, all this time, I wasn't trying to cross the street to reach him. Maybe I was waiting for someone to walk up beside me. Someone like Isaiah. Someone who knew. There's this moment during restoration, not just cars, but anything broken, where it stops feeling like repair and starts becoming memory. Like you're not fixing it anymore, you're preserving the ghost of something sacred. That's what the Caprice had become by that autumn. A monument. A story we could sit inside. I started calling it the archive. Isaiah just called it Dad. We kept the Friday Boys going. What started as 2 brothers turned into 12 kids over 6 months. Some angry. Some quiet. Some like Isaiah, watching everything, drawing when they couldn't speak. We gave them old parts, beat-up frames, busted lawnmowers just to take apart and figure out. It wasn't therapy. But it was healing. Not all of them stayed. One boy named Rayvon stopped coming after his mom's boyfriend moved in. Another, Marcus, came just twice, then left a note on the workbench that just said, "Not ready." We kept his note. Taped it to the wall. Not ready didn't mean broken. It just meant next time. I started drawing again too. Not cars. People. My father, mostly, what I remembered, what I imagined. Isaiah helped me fill in the blanks. The slope of his nose. The way he squinted in sunlight. We recreated him the only way we could, together. Tamika came by once. Walked through the garage, ran her hand across the Caprice's roof, and smiled like it hurt. "He used to call this car his church," she said. "Didn't know how to pray, but he knew how to drive." I told her he still didn't know how to park. She laughed. And then cried. And then asked if she could sit inside. That same week, Isaiah turned 14. We didn't throw a party. Didn't bake a cake. Instead, we drove. Up 75, past Flint, into the woods along Iosco County. Just the 2 of us, a bag of gas station snacks, and the Caprice humming like it remembered the road better than we did. "Where are we going?" he asked. Somewhere without fences. He looked out the window. That's most of the world. Not where we come from, I said. We pulled off the highway onto a dirt road that led to a clearing. An old campground my dad once mentioned in a letter. Said he used to hide there as a teenager when life got too loud. There was nothing left now but pine trees and silence. Isaiah got out, stretched his arms to the sky, and said, "This is what it feels like to breathe." I just nodded. Because he was right. We built a small fire and sat on opposite logs. No music. No letters. Just space. He broke the silence first. "You think we'll ever forget him?" "No," I said. "But maybe one day we'll stop needing to remember him to feel whole." He looked down at his shoes. "I think I already have." That hit different. Not in a sad way. In a grown-up way. Like watching someone put their own pieces back together. He gave me a drawing before we left. The Caprice again, but this time, it wasn't parked or idling. It was mid-turn, tires lifting, motion lines around the wheels, dirt flying up behind it. And in the driver's seat? Me. No one in the passenger side. No one watching from a distance. Just me. Driving. Owning the road. I held the drawing like scripture. Later that month, I was offered a job out of state. Nonprofit director in Indianapolis, youth engagement, car rehab programs, mentorship expansion. Everything I'd built here, scaled bigger. I didn't answer right away. I drove instead. Back to the old motel. Room 9 had been gutted since the last time. New paint. New carpet. Nothing left of him. Still, I stood in the doorway for a long time, just listening. To what, I don't know. Maybe the silence. Maybe the past. I dropped one last letter under the threshold. Didn't read it. Didn't sign it. Just left it there like a stone on a grave. When I told Isaiah about the job, he didn't flinch. "You gonna take it?" "I don't know." "You should," he said. "It's what you're supposed to do." "What about you?" He shrugged. "I'll still be here. So will the Caprice." "You think you'll miss me?" "I think I already do." That hurt more than I let on. But I smiled anyway. Because watching him grow was the closest thing to redemption I'd ever known. On my last night before the decision, we sat in the car one more time. Just the two of us. No music. No tools. No talk. He handed me a folded paper before we stepped out. Inside was a new drawing. Same car. This time, both seats were empty. The doors were open. And a small sign on the road read, "This way." I looked at him. He just said, "Go." The next morning, I called the nonprofit. Accepted the offer. Packed what little I needed. And before I left, I handed Isaiah the keys to the Caprice. He blinked like I'd given him a map to his own heart. "I'll keep her running," he said. "I know you will." We didn't hug. We weren't built for that. But we stood side by side in the driveway, looking at the car. Then he said, "You think he'd be proud?" I answered without thinking. "I think he is." I moved to Indianapolis in the fall of 2010. The streets were cleaner, quieter. Fewer broken windows, fewer ghosts. But part of me missed Detroit's noise, its cracks, its pulse. Missed the way home never tried to be something it wasn't. The job kept me busy, meetings, grant writing, mentorship training, interviews. I spent my days trying to build what I'd found in that garage with Isaiah into something replicable. Something real. The first Friday after I moved, I stood outside our new youth center as the school across the street let out. Kids poured out through the chain-link gate, yelling and laughing and tossing backpacks like they didn't weigh anything. I watched from the sidewalk. And just for a second, I saw him. Not my father. Me. 10 years old. Back pressed to the fence. Waiting for someone to care enough to cross the street. I smiled and turned away. Isaiah called every week. Didn't always talk long. But he always had something new. Put a new coat of primer on her. Devin let me teach a younger kid how to strip a carburetor. Drew a new version of the hood ornament. Looks like wings now. Each call felt like a breath from the Caprice itself. Like the old metal was still in motion, still carrying us. And even from hundreds of miles away, I could feel her wheels turning under both our feet. One day, months after the move, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single drawing. A driveway. A house. A boy standing by a fence. And across the street? The blue Caprice. No one inside. Just an open door. And beneath it, Isaiah's scrawl. He made it across. I hung it in my office. Right above my desk. Every kid who sat across from me noticed it. Some asked what it meant. Some didn't. The ones who did? They usually stayed. They usually came back. In the spring, I went back to Detroit for a weekend. Devin invited me to speak at a community event for youth mentorship. I said yes, but really, I just wanted to see Isaiah. The garage looked different. Brighter. Painted blue and gray. Chrome details polished to a mirror sheen. Tools lined up like soldiers. Kids everywhere, laughing, arguing about socket sizes, blasting old-school hip-hop over cheap speakers. And there she was. The Caprice. Shining in the sunlight like she'd never been broken. New tires. Fresh coat. Windows clear as glass. I walked up and ran my hand along the hood. Feels like she remembers me, I said. She never forgot, Isaiah said behind me. He was taller now. Voice deeper. Still had the same eyes though, like he could see the whole world but only trusted a piece of it. He gave me a hug this time. Said nothing. Just held on for a second longer than boys are supposed to. We spent that night driving. Not far. Just around. Past the old school. The motel. The lot where the Caprice had been abandoned. He drove. One hand on the wheel, the other resting out the window like it had always belonged there. You ever talk to him? I asked. Sometimes, he said. Usually when I'm working. Or right before I sleep. Me too. He paused. Then, I don't think I need him to answer anymore. I nodded. Because I knew what he meant. That night, we parked at Belle Isle and watched the city lights blink against the river. Neither of us said much. The Caprice ticked beside us, cooling like a living thing catching its breath. Then Isaiah reached into the glove box and pulled out a bundle of letters. New ones, he said. From the boys. They write after each project. Before they leave. He handed them to me. I didn't read them all. Just one. It said, Dear whoever comes next. I used to think people left because of me. Like I broke something I didn't know how to fix. But here, I built a whole bike with my own hands. It runs. That means maybe I still can too. Thank you. Tyrell, age 12. When we got back to the garage, Isaiah pulled something from the back seat. A license plate. Freshly painted. Blue with white script. W8ING. I laughed. He didn't. I think we should hang it, he said. Let people know where it started. So we did. Right above the garage door. Framed. Lit with a single bulb that flickered sometimes. Didn't matter. The message still burned. I left Detroit again the next morning. But I didn't feel like I was leaving. Because the waiting was over. The silence had been filled. Not with noise. With presence. With people. With motion. Sometimes, I still hear the Caprice in my dreams. Engine low. Wheels humming. And always, that door swinging open. Like he's just stepped out. Finally crossing the street. Finally saying the thing I waited my whole life to hear. I was watching. I was scared. But I never stopped loving you. We don't need fences anymore. Not me. Not Isaiah. Not the boys we keep teaching how to build and unbuild and build again. Because the truth is, we are all just blue cars. Waiting to be driven. Waiting to be claimed. Waiting to be seen.